What's up? I'm Liz, this is Blitzay DIY, and today we are going to be doing another Reason tutorial, this time taking a look at the Subtractor Polyphonic Synthesizer within Reason. We've gone over the basics, kind of getting started with Reason, how the synthesizers work within the rack, and also how the sequencer works. And if you missed any of those videos, I will link them below in the description, also in the cards here. But let's go ahead and jump right in. First, the Subtractor, where it gets its name is from a thing in electronic music called subtractive synthesis, which is basically taking a signal and running it through filters to affect the sound, and that's how the first, like, Moog synthesizers and things like that were created. So this is a very traditional synthesizer, where you're taking a signal here and running it through some filters. First let's zoom in a bit and get into the guts of what makes the Subtractor tick. So to get started, you kind of see the oscillator here, oscillator 1 and 2, and these are the waveforms, and essentially you have a choice in Reason to do either classic waveforms like triangle, square wave, more of like a saw, a sine wave, and then there are these other ones. There's a lot of them actually. All the way up to 32. And I'm going to scroll back down because for the purpose of this video I'm going to stick with the kind of traditional waveforms. I'm actually going to start with a square wave. And because the waveforms are kind of best for building sounds from scratch, for kind of stripped down synth sounds. The pre-mixed ones, kind of 5 through 32, will have a more produced sound and more of kind of like an emulating a traditional instruments. So you see here I've selected a square wave on oscillator 1, and that's what it sounds like. But let's say you wanted to have it sound a bit lower. You can change what octave. Let's stick with 3. And now let's say you want more. What you'll do is you'll turn on oscillator 2 by clicking this little button here. And now it sounds a lot fuller. And you can also change the octaves there. So let's... And now it kind of sounds like they're fully mixed together, and that's kind of graphically shown with this little circle here, and that's kind of the mode that the synth is in. You can click it. So now they're kind of... It's kind of meant to show as a graphical rep of how the oscillators are being mixed together. So let's do a line. I like that. And then the other part of this kind of module in here is the noise. Now, if I turn on noise, notice all of a sudden there's like kind of this weird distortion. So I don't use noise a lot. It's good for kind of creating these little kind of the 8-bit drum sounds. Like if I were to bring this all the way down. See, that doesn't sound too bad, but I mostly will leave noise off. Okay, so now that you've got your kind of basic waveform going with the oscillators, next I kind of like to work clockwise with the effects here. So think of this as 12 o'clock and then moving forward. And so first we're going to start with filter 1, which is a classic voltage controlled filter that kind of deals with the EQ and bringing out different frequencies and kind of emphasizing them, de-emphasizing others. And this is the subtractive part of the subtractor, because you're taking away parts of the sound spectrum. First, what you're looking at here is the frequency, and right now it's kind of has a setting that's not going to really affect the sound, but if I just hold down a G, you can see it's really affected. It gets sharper up here and lower here, and now the reason for that, you see the type is here, and these mean notch, so kind of like, think of like an EQ notch kind of going across the whole spectrum. Next is HP is high pass, BP is band pass, which kind of in the middle, and then low pass 12, low pass 24. That means kind of a bigger range in the low end of the spectrum. So right now it's at low pass 12. See what low pass 24 sounds like. See, it sounds a little bit more like kind of, it's got that, I don't want to make like weird sound, but like has kind of more of a wider, lower sound now. Notch sounds totally different than high pass. Hear how everything is really on the high end of the spectrum's really like pushing out there. That's what that's going on there. And then band pass, a little bit more mid-range, and then we're back to the low range. So because the notch was so powerful, gotta do that. Now you see here there's filter 2, which is off right now, but if I turn it on, see how it's making it sound kind of low? So if I link it, it's very subtle, but can affect it a little bit more. Basically like a filter on top of a filter. So next we go to the envelopes. And now so we got the amp envelope, the filter envelope, and the mod or the modulation envelope. And you notice there's ADSR on the bottom of all three of them. That stands for attack, decay, sustain, and release. And they do exactly what it sounds like. The first one, the amp envelope, overall level of sound coming out of the synth, and this will affect how quickly or slowly a note begins sounding after a key is pressed on the MIDI controller, and how quickly or slowly the note stops sounding after a key is released. So like so right now attack's at 0, and notice like as soon as I press the key, it's basically playing. Now if I bring this up a bit, see it kind of swoops into it. And then decay, you hear it for a little bit. If I bring it down, and that's basically how much it's sounding right now. See, it's nice and big. Now it's like nothing. So, and then sustain. Not getting a lot of sustain. I'll be honest, I'm not hearing a lot of difference. And release. Notice no hands, and it's still going. See, it can sound a bit muddy, but it's a cool effect if that's kind of what you're going for. So then we have the filter envelope right next door to the amp envelope. And this filter controls those parameters that we talked about, the attack, decay, sustain, release, for filter 1 and 2. Think of it as a way to fine-tune this filter right here. So you hear the filter kind of comes in later. Here it kind of shifts right in there. And then decay. And then you can also affect the amount on this envelope. So now the modulation envelope controls same parameters that we've talked about, the ADSR, for the modulator, which we haven't gotten to yet, but that's the LFO is the modulator. So let's go to the LFO. And LFO is also a low frequency oscillator. Now, if you remember, these are oscillators too. So what is the low frequency oscillator doing? It's creating oscillations or kind of flutters and movement over the patch that you've been building. So you're basically selecting a waveform shape here on the left that will move through your patch. So if you select the triangle, there's going to be kind of this feeling of like a triangle going up and down. If you do the one right under it, kind of like a swoop, you'll feel like that's going through, and so on, so on. And then you can affect the rate or the speed, how fast or slowly that kind of movement is going through, and also how much of a presence it's going to have in your sound too by the amount. And then you can also say what part of this whole thing you want it to be affecting. So do you want the kind of sound to be going through the oscillator? Do you want it to be going through the filter? You know, all those kind of things. And it's probably most popular running through the oscillators. So selecting these two. Or also through the filters too. If you want to run it through everything, you'll select mix, which is taking the mix out from the synth and running the LFO through the whole thing. So let's play around with this a little bit. And notice nothing's happening until I select amount. So you can go to sounding really goofy, really fast. Probably a more traditional one is to do the triangle wave. So that's a little goofy, not too goofy. Now see, there's also an LFO too, and what you can do with that is you can have the same kind of parameters you set up here, go to a different destination. So okay, and so we've kind of made our way through, except for this little section down here, which is the velocity section. Velocity controls are more connected to Reason's sequencer window. It allows you to mix how much of each module you want in the final sounds. Notice there's the amp, the FM, modulation envelope, frequency envelope, all those. Velocity refers to the strength of the signal. So the higher the velocity, the louder or stronger the module will be in the final mix from the synth. Now I often leave these basically at 12 o'clock or neutral. You can play around with them a little bit more. When I have used them, I find they work a little bit better kind of in an automation kind of sense, which you can do more in the sequencer. And I'll be doing another video to kind of go a little bit more in depth in the sequencer to like show how you can actually control each of these individual knobs and everything by creating automation within the sequencer to have it like, let's say you wanted this to constantly be changing. You can draw kind of a line within the sequencer to automatically do that, which is pretty cool. So now that we've kind of gone through this whole side, last but not least, I do want to discuss some of the controls on the left here. Now first, you see polyphony with a number above it. And this refers to how many notes can be played at the same time. So right now it says 8. So polyphony refers to how many notes can be played at the same time, and basically if you want chords to be able to be played, you want to have it around 8 or even more. If you want one of those kind of bouncy synths, if you put it down to 1, that means only one note can be played at the same time, and this is how that sounds. And I find that's really cool for basses, because you can get a really nice... it kind of creates this bouncy synth, which actually is technically considered to be a mono synth, and anything above mono is considered to be a poly synth, or a synth that can play chords. 10 is usually a good safe number, unless you're doing some crazy kind of John Williams style string arrangements. And if you are doing that, please let me know in the comments, because I would love to hear some John Williams like string arrangements made with Subtractor. That'd be pretty cool. Okay, so you'll also see these bend and modulation wheels, which are some classic synth controls that you've probably seen on like actual hardware synth before. If your MIDI controller actually has these, mine doesn't, but there are some that do have them, you can control these with the hardware, which is really cool. And then you can also control these with the mouse, obviously like I'm doing here, or with automation controls in the sequencer, like I talked about with changing rate over time. You can also change these over time too. So if you and you're seeing like there's a number showing up every time, so those are the decimal numbers that you'd be typing in or controlling. Okay, so that's basically everything for controls, and now let's say you really like this patch that you've built and you think you may want to use it again. You can save the patch by clicking this little floppy disk button, and you see the save patch dialog pops up. But by the way, what are we going to do when floppy disks start to disappear from popular memory for save icons? I mean, I assume like interface or GUI designers are working on that, but like I'm a little concerned. Even right now, like, do people like born after 1995 know what these are? That's scary. Okay, well anyway, you click this, window opens up, allows you to save it in a folder, and if you're going to be making a lot of custom patches, I recommend making folders for each synth that you're creating patches for. Wherever you store your production files. Notice here like Subtractor sounds, and these are all the Subtractor patches that I've made and saved. And by making separate folders and labeling them, then you'll know exactly where the patches are and what synths they belong to. Now let's say you want to load up one of your custom patches. You'll click the folder icon right next to the floppy disk, and you'll navigate your way to your patch save location. Now you'll notice that when you do that, you go into the default Subtractor patches that come stock with Reason. So that's why it's really important to know where you saved your patches. Look, if I navigate around, music production, Reason files, Subtractor sounds. So you're going to have to navigate to them, so that's why it's really important. But once you find one that you want, and then you just press OK. And then see it's loaded up. The patch name's there. And oh yeah. So yeah, you can get a lot of different sounds out of the Subtractor. Obviously it's more on kind of the analog sounding, but if that's what you're into, then this is a pretty awesome synth to mess around with in Reason. And I think it's one of the most intuitive synths also available. The others can get a little bit more technical and a little bit more kind of intense in how things are layered. So I think the Subtractor is one of the better ones to start off with making custom patches for. It's actually the one that I started with. So that's why I wanted to start going going into the synths with this one in particular. Okay, so that's been all for today's episode. If you liked it, toss me a thumbs up. If you hated it, toss me a thumbs down. Leave your questions and comments below. Find me on Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, and Instagram for all the behind the scenes nonsense. And until next time, this has been Blitz City DIY.